Good morning. I'm Bishop Dean Wolf. I'm the rector of St. Bart's, and I'm delighted to be hosting this forum with the Reverend John Cassel, who's the treasurer and board vice chair of Seraj Library Project. John has an undergraduate degree in sociology and psychology from Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania, a Master of Divinity from Bethany Theological Seminary in Oak Brook, Illinois, and he's done graduate study in sociology at Penn State. He's an ordained minister in the Church of the Brethren. Some of you may remember that that's my early connection, and John's acted as the moderator, board member, treasurer, and church schools teacher in a variety of different capacities. We met when he was serving as the director of field education and dean of students at Bethany Theological Seminary, and it's just great to pick up this acquaintance 30, 40 years later. So
remarkable.
Welcome, John. All this experience led John to work with the Seraj Library Project, with its mission to work alongside Palestinian communities to establish libraries as safe, beautiful, and vibrant community centers. So welcome to St. John's. John, we're so glad you're here.
Okay, and I am absolutely delighted to be here to reconnect with Mark and his wife. And we have a granddaughter at Barnard, so we get to double up with a visit to our granddaughter in New York City, which is very, very nice. Really, Seraj has a couple of connections with St. Bart's. And one is, I don't know whether you know this, that there's some administrative responsibilities with the Robert Paddock Fund, the Bishop Robert Paddock Fund. And that fund has given us enough money that we could put the children's library in one of our newer sites in BART'S. And our board president was talking to Mark Sisk, who's one of the people, Bishop Mark Sisk, who's one of the people connected to this fund, and he was thanking Mark for giving us these grant monies. And Mark said, no, I should be the one thanking you. Here we are charged to spend this money according to our values and the people that we think will use it wisely. And so I thank you for providing a place where we can give this money. Now that seems to me a really nice tribute. The other connection is that your rector and others went on a pilgrimage this summer. And one of the places they visited was a Seraj Library. In fact, the BART'S one, where that children's library is. And they said, we should get some Seraj people to come and meet with us. And so here I am. At some point, I hope you can get some of the people I'm going to talk about in this couple minutes to come and spend more time with you. So I have two questions for all of you. I hope to make this a little bit personal. How many of you have been to the Holy Land, to Palestine, Israel? So really, quite a few. Because if you want to understand Seraj Library Project, you have to understand that in some ways it's a response to the occupation. What can we do about the occupation? And you'll see that the Seraj Library comes from that. Now, how many of you grew up in a town with a public library? See, that's almost everybody. And that just did not happen in Palestine. And so the idea of these little community libraries was a new idea, and we'll talk some more about that. My own personal connection to this is that Joyce, my wife Joyce, is sitting over here. She has spent a lot of time in Palestine, but she retired first, and then when I retired, we spent 3 months in a World Council of Churches program called Ecumenical Accompaniment in Palestine and Israel. And Joyce spent 3 months in Hebron, which you may know is a very troubled place. And I spent 3 months in Bethlehem. And what I did in Bethlehem, in part, was we lived very near Checkpoint 300. There's thousands of workers that go from the West Bank into Israel every day to work. And the O's that coming from Bethlehem and the south West Bank all go through Checkpoint 300. So we would get up at 4:30 in the morning and go over there just to watch what happens. Did you all go through Checkpoint 300? You probably drove through the bus gate, but the workers have to go through. And they line up. They start queuing up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because if they're going to get to work at 6 in Jerusalem, now it's only just a mile or two up the road, but they have to get through the checkpoint. And frankly, the Israelis make it as hard as possible for them to get through the checkpoint. And only certain ones can get through. Here's the wall that they have to go through. So when I came back from that 3 months in Bethlehem, I was very interested in working on Palestinian cause. And just at that moment, this guy was looking for a new treasurer for the Seraj Library Project. I don't have any financial background, as Dean told you, but I can balance a checkbook. So I said, sure, I'll volunteer to be the treasurer. And it's really good work. But so I'm wanting you to meet a couple of people here, and this is the first one, Cotton Fight. And he was an Episcopal priest. And during the Second Intifada, he was very distressed with the senseless violence that was going on, and he didn't understand it. And as a pastoral counselor, he wanted to understand it. So he went to Israel and Palestine and talked to people and tried his best to learn about it. And he came back convinced that the only solution to this is justice for the Palestinians. So he started working for the Palestinian cause, and he did a lot of political stuff. But in the end, he said, you know, I want to work with Seraj because it's simple and it's practical and it's books and activities for children and families, and that's what I want to be part of. So he really gave himself to the organization, and we are what we are today in part because of Cotton. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago, and we've tried to carry on his work. I'm telling you a story now, and the story isn't finished. And if you want to hear more about this story, you can go to our website, serajlibraries.org, and sign up for our newsletter. Okay, this is how it all began and grew. This gentleman, Estefan Salome, came as a young Palestinian to Chicago to be a student at North Park College. And he stayed long enough to finish a PhD at the University of Illinois. But as a poor young student, he taught Arabic classes to make money. And the Presbyterians put up a little Arabic program because they wanted to be more global. And one of the students in his Arabic class was Jim Wall. Some of you may know that name. Jim Wall was the editor of Christian Century. And so Estefan, in his studies, had to do like a project. And so he wrote up a business plan for this idea he had of libraries in the Palestinian communities. And he told the class about that. And they said, well, let's not make this just an academic paper, let's do it. So they set about collecting some money, and they sent Estefan, who met and married Lori. Lori Milner was from Carroll Stream, which is suburban Chicago. So the two of them went to live in Palestine, and they had some money from this Arabic class. And the plan was to establish a community library. And Estefan went to his hometown, Jifna. And this is a really important part of the story. one of the guiding principles of Seraj Library Project is that they do this in partnership. So in Jifna, they partnered with a women's organization in Jifna, and this is the way we always do it. The people in Jifna provided the location. Seraj provided the books and the bookshelves and the tables and the computers and all the stuff you need. But it was a community that provided the staff and the volunteers. And it also meant that the project was embedded in that community, responsive to their needs. It was owned by the community. We gave it to them. We stayed with them then in support of that. But it means that it isn't people in Chicago that are saying, hey, here's what you need. It's people in Palestinian villages that say, here's what we would find so valuable. And so it's not just a library. What's the line? Libraries build collections. Good libraries build communities. So the whole thing is that it's not just books and children's books, but it's a place to gather. It's a place where Palestinian women can come together. It's a place where Palestinian women can exert their authority. All these things are really important to the society and to how they can kind of continue to thrive given the circumstances. So, so that first library was in Jifna, and very important to understand the partnership piece. And now we have 12. So here's Jerusalem, Ramallah. I was in Bethlehem. Joyce was down here in Hebron. And you know that geography. And the last two that we did, I don't want to start the movie. The last two that we did are a little different. As Seraj grew and matured, we wanted to play a larger role in sort of the national picture, but we also came to realize that those community libraries, some of them thrived, some of them they just couldn't sustain it, because if you're living under occupation, running the community library is not necessarily at the top of your list. You're spending all day just trying to figure out how to live and how to support your family. So we made now 2 cultural centers. And here's the Storytelling Center, which is in Brzezice. So you can see the variety of activities that go on in these places. And these 2 cultural centers are also partnerships. Riwak is a group of Palestinian architects that have been finding and rehabbing old Ottoman buildings. And so both the Storytelling Center, which is in Kfar Akwa, which is between Ramallah and Jerusalem, and there's more to be said about that, and Brzezice are both in these old buildings that Riwak has remodeled. So they're just spectacular spaces. The one you were in was nice, huh?
Beautiful, wonderfully appointed, and in deep contrast to a lot of the poverty that you see surrounding it.
Right. So Lori Salome, who's now our executive director, one of her deep commitments is that we want some places where these Palestinian children and families can go that's beautiful, because so much of their life is not beautiful. And so these provide some beautiful spaces. And because it's a partnership with Barak, they gave us a lease to these places for really not much money at all. The Storytelling Center is a very important part of what we're doing now. It was Golda Meir that said Israel would be a land with no people for a people with no land. Now, of course, the first part of that just isn't true. The Palestinians had a vibrant and strong culture, very sort of thriving society. So the idea that this was a land with no people, but Israel in some ways needs to make that true, and part of the way they've been trying is to really diminish the Palestinians' ability to tell their own story. So a storytelling center where we both collect these stories and tell them is really an important part of what we're trying to do right now. And even before the center got started, this woman that you saw in the movie, Fida Atta, is an incredibly wonderful master storyteller. She's just excellent. And so she's a large part of what Seraj has become, in part because you'll see in the next little video that storytelling is a large part of what these libraries do. But even before they got the center going, their first project was to make a film. And it's a kind of typical Palestinian story, and it's 18 minutes long, and they submitted it to the Chicago Palestinian Film Festival, and they accepted it. And wonderfully, by happenstance, Fida was able to be in Chicago for the premiere of that film. So the first time she saw it on a big screen with a full-packed audience was at that film festival. So that was a wonderful day that we could share with Fida. Here's an example. Let's see, what time is it? Well, I want to say a couple more things. So the reason that I'm invested in this, and I think so many of us, and in Chicago there's a pretty large community, and we'll have this fall a benefit. Our typical benefit is we have a sit-down dinner, and we sell tickets for more than the dinner costs, and we make money. This year we're going to do a nice sort of festival where people will gather, and we're hoping for maybe 200 or 250 people gather to taste Palestinian food and Palestinian music and just get a taste of what this is all about and get a chance to tell our story. And the reason why it's an easy story to tell, and we've never adopted sort of high-powered fundraising techniques. We simply tell this story, and people say, yeah, I want to be part of that, and they give us money. So that's really been a remarkable part of the thing. And I think the reason why people see it so important is, in fact, I have a little list here. Let me look at my little list. So why are Seraj Library Project libraries and the cultural centers so valuable? So the Palestinian world is a closed-in world. And books, we have a great picture of a little girl in the grass carefully reading the book. And the fact is, even though she's right there in that little community in the Jordan Valley, she can go anywhere with a book, right? So that's one. It provides hope at times when there doesn't seem to be much hope. It provides safe spaces. People have troubled lives. They don't feel safe. In the library, the hope is they can feel safe, especially children. It's built on this partnership notion. And to do that, you really need civic leaders. The community people need to step up and take some responsibility for their community, and we're glad to help them do that. Palestine doesn't have a very good culture of reading books. When Joyce and I would go in Palestinian homes, you wouldn't often see books sitting around, but they also have a wonderful culture, a number of really striking writers through the years. And so in some ways we feel like if you start with children, we can build that culture back. Lastly, support for families and communities. We really feel like we're doing something not just for the people that read our books, but for the larger communities. Okay, this is an example of the kind of thing. This is a storytelling marathon, and they do this every year. And don't tell me it's not going to run. There we go. So again, nobody wants to get more emails, but I would encourage you. We don't send out many, and the intent is that everything you get from us would be worth reading. So I encourage you to sign up for our email. My intent was to time this so that we'd have some chance for questions and conversation. And I think we have a lot of time for questions and conversations.
So just to put a couple of things into context, the Bishop Paddock Fund is something that Bishop Mark Sisk and I we're on the board of.
You're on
and
too.
So that's some of the connection here. Liz Gillespie serves as the secretary of the fund, and she's my executive assistant and does a wonderful job of putting things together. She was instrumental in our pilgrimage, and so she said, well, we're going to be in the area. Maybe we can drive by the Seraj Library and see it firsthand. So everybody on the pilgrimage had an opportunity to do that, and it was impressive to see both these beautiful facilities with lots of books and other materials in a place where it's hard to come by. It's hard to come by a place where boys and girls together can study after school. It's hard to find a place that's safe, and so this is a supervised, safe space for children to meet after school, and a lot of good things come as a result of that. So that's my quick take on it and putting a couple of things in perspective.
These pictures look like Palestine, didn't they? Mm-hmm. The film. I mean, obviously, because we took them there, but if you haven't been, it gives you a clue and a feeling for what the West Bank looks like.
So we've got an opportunity for you all to participate and let us know what kinds of questions you might have. I'm looking out. I see Manny and Eric were also on this trip. So if you want to say a word, feel free to jump up, and we'll put you on.
While you're looking at those questions, Mark, I just wanted to say that so when Estefan came to the States, there are three things he loved. One, being able to get in the car and just drive and not find yourself at a checkpoint. But the other two were libraries, and as a student, of course, he's got lots of time to be in libraries, but also bookstores. You know, all the wonderful bookstores we used to have before Amazon. And so that's part of what inspired this project, his love for books and his love for those kinds of spaces.
So if you're here in person on Park Avenue and like to pose a question to John, Natalie Johnson is picking up your questions. If you're joining us online, you can type an email to the Reverend Zach Nain at znyin@stbarts.org, or type your question into the live chat on YouTube or in the comments section on Facebook. We've got lots of opportunities for you to connect.
Good.
John, can you say more about the book making in Palestine and shipping books from here to there? People I know always want to say, how can we be helpful, and can we build up the library in that way?
That's a really good question. And what we've found is that when we buy books from Arabic publishers, often in Egypt or in Jordan or in Lebanon, that's really the best. Because if we try and ship books there, Israel imposes a tariff on that. And so it's just awkward. And frankly, most of the books we have in our collection, we have some English books, and especially some that have been written about Seraj Library Project, and some that seem really important for this work. But most of our books are in Arabic. And so when people say, gee, I'm downsizing, let me give you this box of books, could you use them in your library? It really doesn't work that way. Yeah. So thank you, but we need to buy the titles that we're interested in and buy them in Arabic.
How are the books selected, both systemically and for the individual child? How do they select the materials?
Well, Lori and the people she works with have developed a kind of a list, and they've bought those titles for every library. But one of the things I really like that's happened is there's a new thing in Palestine, which is a kind of a book festival. And so all these publishers come and display their books. And what they've done is they've given money to each of the libraries and said, go to the book festival and pick those titles that you'd like.
Yeah.
So those two ways have been the principal ways that we've stocked the library.
And then I'm guessing with individual students, there's conversation about what their interests are, and that's how books are selected or assisted.
Well, the Berzaites one, obviously we don't want to compete with the university library, but that library closes, the university library. There's a couple of universities in Berzaites, and all of those campus libraries close at 4. And so our library, for college students, one of the big things we offer is the opportunity to print their papers. So they've written them on the computer, but they don't have a printer. So they come to the library and then print them, and then they can hand them in. But also, the Berzaites Library stays open into the evening, and there's a little coffee shop there, so they can buy coffee and they can gather and have a place to talk with each other. And in fact, there's significant pressure from that group to stay open longer. So we don't have the resources to provide as much. And the one in Kufr Quab is the same thing. Those aren't basically students. These are community people that are pressing. We love this space, and we want to have more of it. And so we need to raise more money so we can have more of it.
What kind of programming and services do these libraries provide? I'm guessing it's different by each library, but what are some of the programs that are offered and some of the other
well, the constants would be, these all have significant children's collections and programs for children. So this storytelling thing that you saw would only be one example. They do reading under the olive trees, which is like our reading week. They do art stuff. So lots of stuff, and we've really led the way in sort of activities for preschoolers. So really very few people in Palestine are working at that level. So Lori's very proud of what we've done for preschoolers. So activities for kids is one. What we found is that women in these communities just use this space to get together and meet with each other and talk and sew and do projects. So in some ways, the library becomes a hub for women's activities. And then we've always worked hard at supporting students. And in fact, because these libraries are all staffed by volunteers, we established a scholarship program for young students that volunteer in our libraries. So that serves us because that means they're going to be sort of more conscientious volunteers, but it also serves them because then they're able to afford going to college. And there's a bunch of good schools in Palestine. My time in Bethlehem, there's Bethlehem University, and there's also Bethlehem Bible College. Bethlehem Bible College, one of the things I like about them is that when you go on a tour, it's really important who your tour guide is. And Israel has lots of Israeli tour guides, but there haven't been as many Palestinian tour guides who can make sure that people hear that part of the story. And so Bethlehem Bible College put up a program, a tour guide program, and they've been producing many more Palestinian tour guides.
John, how are young adults and teenagers engaged in this? You mentioned that they were college students. Is that a significant part of the programming?
Yeah. my impression is that in Palestine, you're a young person until you're, I don't know, 26 or something. And clearly, they really appreciate gathering places. And the point you made is really important. Much of education in Palestine is divided by sexes. So you have a girls' school and a boys' school. And Estefan and Laurie, from the very beginning, sort of resisted that and said, you know, these kids ought to learn to be with each other. And so that's been an important part. And so there's teenagers and there's college students and there's other folks that come around in part because this is one place where they can engage one another.
Eric, are you? Do you want to? I
Come in the
have
camera view.
no idea how this works, but
That will probably make two of us.
that's not on. Here we go. There we go.
Great. As Dean, I'm Eric Leach Rodriguez, and as Dean said, I was among the pilgrims that had the good pleasure of making it to one of the locations. And what Dean didn't mention is that it served as an oasis for us after several wrong turns of finding it. So the beauty of the space and how well renovated and really how functional the old space was. And we were given a description of the rubble that greeted the project volunteers who then made it into the beautiful space that we saw. Also, there was, just to give a brief sense of it, we also enjoyed a rooftop cafe and got to sample some of the refreshments that were served there. I guess I don't know how typical that space is, but I got the sense that its very existence is controversial. And I'm curious how folks navigate being a beacon of, being enough of a beacon to draw attention of the people that you want to serve, but staying under the radar of the folks who might shut it down. Thank you, Eric.
The place, I've not been to that library in Brazais. I'm keen to go. But what it was is they had an old city. You all know that these communities all had little center cities. So the old city in Jerusalem, the old city in Bethlehem, the old city in Hebron, and in this instance, the old city in Brazais had deteriorated, and the Rewalk people rehabilitated it. And that's the place we were. So it is absolutely remarkable in terms of all the rest of our libraries. You know, they're just in ordinary spaces and nothing remarkable. But this one, the Brazais community wanted to revitalize that old city. And so they invited us to come there, as well as they invited some other not-for-profits to come and set up business. And so that's why it's such a remarkable space.
And it's a college town.
And it's a college town in the first place. So in some ways, most of our libraries are in rural, underserved communities. But this one is in this college town. And I think Estefan and Laurie are very committed to the communities that they've served, but they're also really glad for this opportunity to influence these generations of Palestinian university students and to be part of that vibrant community, which is what Brazais is.
I just wanted to add that Palestine has one of the highest literacy rates of Middle East countries. So if you put that in context with not having libraries, non-fiction stuff, resources, it's still at the top.
So I'll just repeat that for the listening audience. Point being made that Palestine has one of the highest literacy rates in that region of the world. And so there's a great deal of interest in the life of the mind in this community.
Which is one of the reasons why our libraries have been so successful. Parents really want their kids to get all the advantages they can get. So Joyce is absolutely right, a high literacy rate, but also a very high unemployment rate in these communities. So in some ways, the library provides a place of hope in this context where you look around and almost everything you see is discouraging. Joyce knows much more about Palestine than I do. I went for one 3-month stint. She's had 4 3-month stints, so a whole year. So she lived for 9 months, not straight, but 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, in Hebron. There are very few Americans who have lived for 9 months in Hebron. That would be another program. I asked Joyce to come back and talk about what's going on in those communities.
Zach, do you have anything to, right? Well, one of the things that I feel like I need to keep repeating because it's not always, I think, understood by Americans. The Palestinian community is also largely the Christian community. Most Christians in this region of the world are Palestinian. And so this library is made for people of all different faiths, but it's an interesting, it was an interesting thing for me the first time that I traveled to Palestine and studied at St. George's College. I think that if you said Palestinian, the next word that came in my mind was terrorist. The idea that you can have a much broader community than what we read about in the United States was an important learning for me.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that clearly is one of the images that gets nurtured in our society, which is most unfortunate. The majority of Palestinians are Muslim, as you know, and the number of Palestinians in Palestine, the number of Christians, is shrinking, in part because people that can get out of town do. I mean, life is so hard that you have to say, well, why would I do this? And the people with Christian connections are the people who tend to have connections that would allow them to leave. So it's a problem, but clearly the Seraj understands itself to be serving the Palestinian community, and essentially that's Muslim community. But we intend to be sort of interdenominational and not, I mean, we're not promoting any particular religion.
Yeah.
We have, you know, there's a number of Christian towns, Tebe being one of them, and that's one of our libraries is. Those of you who have been to Palestine, you got some Tebe beer, which is very good. But there's only a few communities where that alcohol, beer, and wine are produced. The monastery by Bethlehem, Crimson, the monks there make wonderful wine.
John, in my experience in volunteering for things, there's usually one thing that's happened that makes me go back for more. Some experience I've had, some moment. What would you say that moment has been for you in working with the Seraj Libraries?
Well, my interest in Seraj Libraries really dates back to my time in Bethlehem. And the thing that I'm so aware of from that time in Bethlehem is that we would meet people and everybody had a horrible story. We have some good friends who had a daughter who was in a full-body cast because she had, I don't know what her medical problem was. But here they were carrying this daughter in this full-body cast to go to the hospital. Well, you don't have the right pass. So you have to come back another day. And then you try and get the right pass, and then they still say you can't come through. So just horrible, horrible stories like that one. And so it really, I'm just aware of all the people that suffer under this, to my mind, unnecessary. There's no reason why all these people who live in Greater Israel can't live there together. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
The question was, what does Seraj mean?
Seraj is an Arabic word, and it's the Arabic word for light. So when they picked it, they had in mind already back at the beginning, we're going to provide light in an area that's full of darkness. We have sent $1.4 million to Israel, to Palestine in this project. So really, it's been really remarkable.
And where have most of your contributions come from? Are they large kind of institutions, or are they individuals?
No. Almost all of our money, with the exception of some grants from these folks and a few others, have come from individuals. And we have lots of people who give us $100 or $500 or $1,000. But we've got really quite a number of people who, these days, if you're over 72, and some of you in this room are, as I am, you can give IRA money, and that doesn't show up as taxable income. So we've got a number of people who really make remarkable gifts in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a mixture, and I think that's healthy. We see that as healthy.
Great. And obviously, people who want to know more about the library can go to the website. People who want to make a contribution can do that through the website. I'm guessing.
Yes, yeah.
We've all gotten better at collecting resources through websites.
You all have lots of places to give your money. Follow our story. That's the key thing. If you would donate, that would be great. But that's not the purpose of this conversation. The purpose of this conversation is to tell this story, and I would hope engage you at some level in this ongoing effort to say how can we improve the lives of Palestinians.
John, thank you so much for coming and being a part of all of this. Anything else for the good of the order? We're so grateful for all of you online who are watching, and for all of you who are here present. John, thank you again for visiting us and for your work in this important project.
Thank you again for the invitation.
To our listeners, stay tuned. Next week, we've got more in store. Thank you. Bye now.